I'm walking along by the estuary at the moment, and I just spotted some hooded crows flying out over the road, and they were dropping something onto the road. And what they're doing is they've picked up shells from the sand, and they're flying over the road and dropping the shells onto the hard surface of the road. And hooded crows, and crows in general, are thought to be quite clever because they've figured out tricks like this to make it easier to get their food. So they drop the shell onto the road, it cracks the shell open, and then they can eat what's inside. What the hooded crows have been snacking on are cockles. You can see here some of the leftover shells from the food that they've been eating. And cockles are a type of shellfish that burrow into the sand, and there are lots and lots of them in the estuary. And in fact, there's lots of food in general in the estuary. It's a really, really special place. This episode is all about the estuary. An estuary is a place where the sea meets the river. So the river is flowing in at the top of the bay, and there'll be smaller streams flowing in around the bay. And then the sea comes in, the tide comes in and covers over the mudflats of the estuary. And estuaries are really, really important habitats. They're full of life. Right now, we're looking at the mudflat with the tide out, and it looks kind of dull and maybe not very interesting, but in fact there are loads of species living here, growing in the sand, and then bigger species eating those smaller species. There are types of plankton and seaweeds, and then small animals like invertebrates, worms, shellfish, crabs, and then bigger species that feed on those. So the estuary is a really, really special place, and we'll learn more about it today. This area is really special for birds. There are lots of birds that migrate here for the winter, and they spend the winter feeding on these mudflats and in the shallow water. And some of these birds will come from places as far away as Iceland or Scandinavia, further up, further north, close to the Arctic. During the winter it gets very cold there, so they'll come down and they'll spend the winter here feeding on all the many organisms and the diversity of species that are in the bay. And what I love about all these birds, they're really, really fascinating to watch, and especially if you have a pair of binoculars, you'll see that they have lots of different types of beaks. And this is really interesting. So some of the birds have these amazing long curved beaks, others have kind of shorter stubby ones. And then also you have ducks, of course, and they've kind of got kind of scoopy, shovel-like flat beaks. And with these different types of beaks, this diversity of beaks, the different birds can feed on different species. So you might get a lot of birds in the same area, but they're not all competing with each other because they'll be feeding on different prey items. And so that's really, really important, the fact that they've got a diversity of beaks and a diversity of feeding habits, and that means that they have a diversity of prey. On the sand here there are loads of worm casts. So there are different species of worm that might live in the sand in the estuary like this. There are ragworms and lugworms, and they leave these casts on the sand, and what the casts are really is actually some of their poo, just really, really sandy poo. And what you'll notice is that quite often beside a cast you see that there's a hole like this. So quite often you see them together. On one side the cast, and then on the other side this little hole in the sand. And so what this is showing is that there's a worm burrow here, and so they burrow into the sand kind of in a U-shaped burrow, and on one side they'll poo out the sand, and then on the other side they'll sort of suck through the water and sift the sand as they suck it down on their mouth end here. So I'm gonna dig one of these and see if I can actually find the worm. There might have been a bird here before me because I can see lots of bird footprints here. so they might have gotten all the worms already, but let's have a go anyway. We'll have a dig and see what we find. So let's see a good one here. Try down here maybe. And what you can see here, you can see really nicely the burrow that they've made, that this worm has made in the sand. So on the top is the cast or the poo, and then here is the burrow going down into the sand. And you can see here even that hole in the sand where the worm has burrowed down through. So let's see if we can find it down here somewhere. Found one of them here. So this is a ragworm, and you see that it's got lots of, well, it's quite difficult to see in fact, but it's got lots of kind of little hairy legs down the sides of its body, and you can see a really red line, a blood vessel running down the length of its body. So the ragworms live in these burrows, and on one side they feed down through that one of these holes in the sand, and then on the other side they poo out the sand to form a cast. And ragworms are omnivores, so they kind of eat just about anything. They'll even kind of feed through the sand, and they'll eat any dead material or plankton that's in the sand. And then they also have these pincers in their mouths, so they can actually eat other live animals as well. So small little animals that they prey on. And worms like these are really important in the estuary, because by digging down into the sand, they cycle nutrients, so they kind of bring nutrients up through the sand. And also, of course, they provide food for bigger animals like the birds that come and feed here for the winter. So this is the ragworm, and you'll see its hairy legs the whole way down its body, and it's kind of got quite a flat body. It's not a fully round worm. I've been watching some birds feeding on the muddy sand in the distance over there. The birds I'm looking at are black-tailed godwits, and this is one of the species of bird that likes to feed on worms like the ragworm. Black-tailed godwits are beautiful birds. They've got these really elegant long legs, and they've got long beaks that are perfect for reaching down into the sand to pluck out prey like those ragworms. What's really interesting about black-tailed godwits is that the males and the females are different sizes. So the females are bigger than the males, and they've got longer beaks. And this means that when they're feeding in the same area, the female birds can feed from deeper down in the sand, and the males will take worms or shellfish or crabs from the shallower sand. So that means that more birds can feed in the same area, and it's kind of like they're sharing the food out, because they're taking the prey from different levels in the sand. Black-tailed godwits would have flown here all the way from Iceland probably. They're one of the species of birds that come and migrate here for the winter, because the estuary is such a good place for them to come and feed for the winter. So they would have flown maybe 1,000 kilometers at the start of the winter to come down from Iceland. Some other species of migratory birds that come here for the winter would actually have flown even further. So imagine they would have come from way up north, close to the Arctic Circle, or northern Scandinavia. So really, really big, long journeys to come down and spend the winter here feeding. So it's really special that estuaries like this are so important for these migratory birds, because it means that by protecting the environment here, we're also protecting a species that spends half of their life in another country like Iceland or Scandinavia or up near the Arctic. And I think that's really special, to think that there's this connection between our environment and even the environments in other countries. I think that's amazing. I'm gonna head away now because the tide is gonna come in. So the sea is gonna come in and cover this whole area. But it's been really amazing to explore the mudflats and to look at some of the species, some of the biodiversity that lives here in the sand and the birds that feed on the smaller animals. And it really reminds me of how important it is to make sure that we protect the water that's flowing in here. So the fresh water that comes in the river and the streams into the estuary. Because there are so many different species of animal living here. Some of those birds that have come from very far away, up near the Arctic, they come to spend the winter here. And by protecting the water that's flowing in, we're keeping the area clean and we're protecting the environment for them. And that's really, really important. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the estuary. It would be really great if you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll have more videos coming soon. So we hope to see you on Scoil again. Bye, see you soon.